I'm convinced the true threat to Malaysia's current government isn't really about the big opposition rallies we see, not the noise on the streets. No, the real danger, I think, is quieter. It's like this slow erosion of trust happening right inside the halls of power. We tend to focus on the big political shows, right? Like that anti-Anwar gathering today. Everyone's talking numbers. Did the opposition land a punch? Did the PM even blink? But what if just getting through that rally, feeling like they dodged a bullet, what if that's actually distracting them? What if it's hiding a much deeper crisis that's sort of brewing from within? A crisis where the leadership itself, the very people promising reform, might be their own worst enemy. That's
Yeah.
what we're digging into today.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you look at how the key players reacted, especially someone like Hamza from the opposition, right after today's gathering. Instead of immediately pushing for, say, a no conference vote in Parliament, he was very clear. No immediate plans for that. Instead, he started talking about a people's no confidence motion, which, let's be honest, sounds like an admission. It suggests the rally didn't pull the massive numbers, maybe that 500,000 they were hoping for, to really force their hand in Parliament. So it looks like their own confidence took a hit.
Right. Less confidence for direct challenge.
Exactly. And then you contrast that with Prime Minister Anwar's reaction. He seemed, well, almost relaxed about it. Even made that joke, didn't he? Telling rally goers not to rush home, stay, see KL like tourists. It's a pretty clear signal from him saying, look, this didn't really shake us. No real threat perceived on his end.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit more. So the opposition maybe didn't get the turnout they wanted. The big show of force failed, perhaps. But there's this other argument bubbling up, and it's getting louder, that the real danger to Anwar's government isn't actually coming from them at all. The argument is, well, that the biggest crisis Anwar faces right now is actually self-inflicted, which is a huge statement, especially when you think about where he came from, the whole Reformasi movement, decades pushing for change, anti-corruption, clean institutions.
It really is. And you hear it sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly, even from people who were his staunchest supporters for years. There's this feeling, this sense that maybe, just maybe, he's drifted from that original reform path. Things like judicial appointments, ensuring they're truly independent, or splitting the attorney general's powers, separating the prosecutor from the government's legal advisor to avoid political influence, and the MACC, the anti-corruption body, making sure it's genuinely independent. These were core promises.
Cornerstones of the reform agenda.
Precisely. And the perception now, among some, is that the commitment, well, it seems to have weakened a bit.
And that leads us straight into a specific case that seems to be crystallizing these concerns, doesn't it? This situation involving Faz.
Yes, exactly. Faz, Anwar's former political secretary. It's gained a lot of traction very quickly. The allegations are serious. We're talking reported links to a corruption case in Sabah involving mining permits. And what really poured fuel on the fire was this audio recording that supposedly surfaced. It allegedly involves the Sabah chief minister, other key people, discussing related matters.
An actual recording.
Apparently. But here's the thing. Almost as soon as it started circulating online, bang, blocked by the MCMC.
The Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission.
Right. And, blocking it like that, instead of making the issue go away, it just made people more curious, more concerned. It amplified everything. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Sabah. It felt much bigger, about transparency right at the top.
So this guy, Faz, he was Anwar's political secretary, a key campaign advisor. How does someone that close suddenly end up under this kind of intense scrutiny? What does that do to public trust? Especially when you look at what happened after the 2022 election. Reports suggest he left politics, but then almost immediately he pops up with directorships, significant shareholdings in multiple big listed companies.
Yeah, prominent ones. Names like Apex, MMAG, even 7-Eleven were mentioned. The report suggested, 4 or 5 different companies he got involved with very quickly.
4 or 5, wow.
Yeah.
So you have this incredibly fast rise in the corporate world, almost overnight for someone who was just recently a political aide. And you put that right next to these corruption allegations swirling around from Sabah.
It inevitably creates a certain picture in the public's mind, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It triggers questions. Cronyism, undue influence. Were political connections used for personal gain? It just begs for answers.
Yeah.
What do you, listening right now, make of that kind of rapid transition? Does it seem above board?
Well, and it's clearly serious enough that it caught the attention of senior figures inside the government itself, like Rafizi. He's a senior minister, known for being quite data-focused, strong anti-corruption stance in the past, and he publicly called on Anwar to take the Faz case seriously.
That's significant, Rafizi saying that publicly.
Very significant, because this isn't just some distant allegation about someone vaguely connected. This is someone who is right there, close to the PM, former Polsec campaign advisor. That proximity makes it a real test case for the government's own reform promises.
And then there's the MACC angle, the Anti-Corruption Commission.
Yes,
Yeah.
their silence or perceived lack of visible action so far on this specific case is noticeable.
Why is that so critical?
Because while the Prime Minister insists he doesn't interfere with the MACC, the fact is he did extend the current MACC chief's tenure. Now, that might be perfectly procedural, but in this context, with allegations swirling around someone close to him and the MACC being quiet...
It creates a perception problem.
Exactly. It raises questions, fairly or unfairly, about potential influence, or at least about the MACC's urgency and independence in tackling a politically sensitive case like this.
Yeah, this is where it gets really crucial for you, the listener, especially if you're Malaysian. Malaysian voters, particularly those who really believed in Reformasi, who backed Anwar for years on that promise of clean government, they have an incredibly low tolerance for corruption. It's just different from other issues.
It absolutely is. Think about economic policies, right? Things like cutting RN95 subsidies or bringing in new taxes. People might grumble, they might debate it fiercely, but often the government can provide a rationale. You know, we need the revenue, or it's for more targeted spending. There's an economic argument, at least.
You can debate the merits, yeah.
Right, but corruption, especially involving people close to power, and then a perception that the authorities aren't acting decisively, that cuts differently. It hits a nerve across all communities, all political lines. It fuels real public anger and resentment.
We saw that with the Zahid DNA case, didn't we? The discharge not amounting to acquittal for the deputy prime minister on those corruption charges. Regardless of the legal arguments, the public reaction was intense. Huge disappointment, a feeling that maybe justice wasn't fully served.
Exactly. That perception of double standards or lack of accountability at the top is incredibly damaging. And the Fahaz situation, because of his closeness to Anwar, touches that exact same raw nerve.
So coming back to the rally today, the relatively low turnout, it's tempting for the government to see that as a win, maybe, a sign of public support.
That would be a dangerous misreading, I think. It's crucial to understand why many people didn't turn up. It's not necessarily because they're thrilled with the current government, not at all. A lot of people, especially, say, non-Muslim Malaysians and probably a big chunk of undecided voters across the board, they stayed away deliberately. Why? Because they didn't want to be seen as endorsing the opposition's agenda or be used as pawns by opposition leaders who they might feel are just pursuing their own interests, maybe even for their families, you know?
So they distrust the opposition's motives, too.
Precisely. They might be unhappy with the government, but they're not ready to jump onto the opposition's bandwagon just yet, especially if they see it as driven by self-interest.
So their absence from the rally doesn't equal support for the government.
Not even close. Many of these people are the undecideds, or maybe even people who were government supporters but are now seriously reconsidering. They represent this silent, potentially shifting block of voters, and that's a huge, maybe hidden challenge for Anwar and his administration. Much more significant, arguably, than a rally that didn't quite meet expectations.
So wrapping this up, what's the big picture here? The government might feel relieved after today's rally fizzled somewhat, but maybe that's just temporary luck, a brief pause.
It could very well be. The storm clouds haven't necessarily passed.
Because the real test, it seems, isn't about fending off these external attacks, these street protests. It's about how the administration handles what's happening inside. These allegations, these perceptions, swirling around people in their own circle.
Will that perceived inaction, especially on something as sensitive as the Faz case, just slowly eat away at the trust, undermine the whole reform narrative this government was built on?
And maybe more critically, what does that mean for you, the voter, down the line, come the next election, when all those quiet, undecided voices finally get their say, not on the streets, but in the ballot box?
That's the multi-million ringgit question, isn't it?
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? How long can any leader, any government, really stay strong if the ground they're standing on is quietly crumbling from within?